Thanks for coming.
Hey,
Cheers.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it seems like Michigan has kind of become a secondary home to you over the past.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
release.
have a joke with my wife where, whenever we refer to it's like I'm having problems navigating or she's confused or should we go up or down? And when she comes to visit with me, it's always like, listen, I live in Detroit, so let me, I know my way around these places. It's not true, but I like the energy. You got to manifest it.
So for the record, you've started a company. It's called Blast Radio, or is it just Blast?
Well, yeah, Blast Radio, Blast Media Group Inc. I think is on the legal paperwork.
Okay.
But
many names, but Blast.
But Blast Radio, yeah, and
I'm a proud member and user.
Yeah, no, and one of our top broadcasters actually. Yeah,
We'll definitely dive in a lot about Blast, but as we discussed earlier, recapped, you were a member of my class this year as a guest.
Yeah,
you were the first guest, virtual guest of the year, and you totally blew my mind and the students' mind with your overall knowledge of your industry and the industry you've carved out, and it flowed so well. I loved hearing what you had to say that I had to invite you to be a part of the seminar.
Oh, thanks.
And I can't wait to get to Blast, but there's so much in the beginning that is really fun and cool to talk about. So if you wouldn't mind giving us just what's 0 to B.E.T, I guess. Where's a little bit of your history from, and where'd you start? And then we can get into the nitty gritty of.
Yeah, it's a weird trajectory in that so let's start with everything starts with music, in that I was very seriously into music. I started playing music when I was 4.
What'd you play?
Piano.
Okay, cool. That's fascinating. There's a big theme of piano with a lot of our guests on the seminar.
Yeah, if if you're gonna have a tiger mom, I think the tiger mom weapon of choice is piano as a cudgel, and I actually enjoyed piano. It was cool, but then it's just got into high school and wanted to do the band thing, so I quickly realized I needed
piano as well, or keys in the band.
Well, I started with keys for a few practices. No, actually, you know what it was? I started piano in the band, doing keys. And terrible vocals, and a lot of frontman energy, but not a lot of frontman skill.
I've been there.
Right. But then very quickly, I decided, what, I want to learn, I need to learn guitar, because I'd try to write stuff for our guitarist, but it didn't really translate properly, because I also didn't have all the composition theory under my belt just yet, and so. Taught myself guitar, and then a similar frustration was I feel like the drummer's not doing it the way I want to do it, so I started teaching myself drums, and obviously bass.
Multi-instrumentalist.
A mediocre multi-instrumentalist. So it's I play everything kind of terrible, but I got very into it. So music.
So the culture of music was always fascinating.
Yeah, and music was very
grabbed you early.
Grabbed me very early. Another thing that was very big to me. I was like, well, I want to do this, and I want to do this. I want to make it in music.
Okay.
So then you start to analyze that problem, and you start to figure out
here comes the physics. I'm hearing the physics coming.
right. I'm like, if I'm gonna do this, I have to do this. I have to win it. I can't I don't want to toil in obscurity necessarily. And then so you start to see okay, there's multiple dimensions to sort of the music world and industry, and
a lot of metaphysics. Okay.
Yeah. And you see that a lot of it was it's really about, and there's also there's little clues a lot of people who do very well in sort of the pop or indie world are say art school kids who dropped out of art school to do music. Then you start to realize a lot of it is about the stylistic dialogue and the musicology and understanding the trend forecasting, and it does follow sort of the similar rules of fashion, where every time some sort of some trend starts to rise. As it rises, there's also the counter trend, the transgressive energy against it starts to become powerful. So I mean, so you start to dig into all that sort of, the music history, the music, and so I spent a lot of time on that, and I really wanted to go to school for music composition theory.
Okay.
And I've been learning music composition theory through like my piano teacher, and then I realized, and then like first of all, like my parents were like absolutely not. I'm a first generation Egyptian, and so
Okay.
like my tales old as time, my immigrant parents were like, yeah, that's adorable, but
Like the piano was not for real. It was just to have you work hard at something when you were younger.
Yeah.
They're like, we didn't want you to become a piano player.
yeah. I mean, to put it in perspective, they were like specifically like, no, the whole point was to get you into college, and so you could go study to go to med school or something, and then like
It
when
worked a little too well, though. It sounds like.
yeah, well, and this is the backfire. I mean, because they said it's like, wouldn't it be great if you would just like be accepting some sort of medical award? And then like you get up and play a piece on a piano, and everyone's like very impressed. It's like,
And you're
what?
like, no, I want the Grammy.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
I want the Grammy Award.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, no, it's not gonna be me, man. Like, but music was very important to me.
I mean, we joke, but that's probably a really pressing issue for a lot of young people.
Yeah.
People in my class, and I'm sure people watching now have had that conversation to either get where they are right now or to explain what they're going to do after they leave.
Right.
So we joke, but it is a serious issue.
It is a serious issue.
As a young person trying to make an identity.
Well, so then there was a secondary rebellion to this, which was like I also happened to be particularly talented at physics, even in my early high school days.
Oh, okay.
I started to be mentored by a professor at Catholic University, starting in 10th grade, and I would spend my hours every weekend working with him on just physics problems after physics problems after physics problems. And so I had a knack for physics, which was cool.
Okay.
And you can sort of see the link between those two things when you're doing it. So I was like, all right, fine. If you're gonna force me into doing STEM, I'm gonna do physics, which is the most philosophical and poetic version of it. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna do that. And then again, my parents, well-intentioned, but obviously a little bit ignorant about how things can operate in the United States. They're the reaction was similar to it was as if I told them that no, I'm moving in, I'm gonna live in a van and cross the country or whatever it is. Like physics, what are you gonna do with physics?
Oh my goodness.
And this mentor of mine had to pull him aside. I was like, physicists do all right. A lot of them go to Wall Street. It's not he was like, I don't know a lot of poor physicists. So.
Okay. And that helped.
So where that was very helpful was, and I still pursued music seriously. I was very much into bands. I was experimenting with a lot of stuff. I was, and one of the
I was cultural anthropology the whole time. I'd never studied anything about music. I wasn't even in band. And my parents weren't going to put me in band because they thought I would be too expensive for an instrument that I wouldn't use in a couple days. So I'm there. I was always doing music as a sub event compared to the degree that I had to get to make my mother happy. And
cultural anthropology, it's just when you compare that to what, it's so adjacent to musicology because it's so much of a human culture is driven by music. So
I love observing, and it was just for me. Apologies, but it was the easiest way to get a good grade without having to leave music too much.
Right, yeah.
So for me, it was okay, if I do the work, the answer's correct because it's basically my observation.
Yeah.
And I'm doing a good job. So for me, it was a good way to do the work and then go to Detroit for the weekend and play shows and do all that. But this isn't about me; it's about you.
No, but then also, but I identify with that because it's it puts you in the position where it's all right, well, this is an adjacent thing because music is so pervasive in culture. It's so the idea of siloing it to a study, of course you can go deeper on it and all of that, but at the same time there's just so many other adjacent skills and abilities that are in studies, and I think that's with everything in terms of understanding the just general ideas marketplace. For example, if one of the things that is really critical for the work that I do is like marketing because it's business, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you really want to understand marketing, what you should always like, I mean, for generally any sort of like thing that you want to study, you should go upstream and think about like what are the more theoretical academic concepts from which it is then applied in that field, right? So, for example, marketing is like really critical, but like where does marketing descend from? It really descends from, of course, economics, but it descends from culture. But it also descends from sociology. So you have to understand sociology, or if you don't have a strong grasp of sociology, all you're copying is just a variety of marketing, like case studies.
Totally.
That may or may not apply to what you're doing. And it's like I'm sure that like Harry's Razors is an incredible company that's like sold a lot of really great stuff. Most recently, like a really great collab.
Yeah.
But like I don't know that a lot of what they do would apply for my business. And if I try to copy that would be a very costly and expensive mistake. However, if I understand the sociology of like how the humans interacting with my brand, what their needs are, some of the core principles of sociology, that can be helpful. So,
and I want to put a footnote there because I would love to discuss when that doesn't work and when the things that you wish you could find scientifically aren't there.
Yeah,
So
well,
we don't have to interrupt your train of thought now, but I think it's a good thing to talk about as well because it doesn't always.
100%. And then that's actually the other thing is like there's also a discipline about all this stuff, which is you have to make sure that you're you can turn the whole thing into an infinite intellectual exercise, and that's great. But then like at some point you have to make payroll.
Yep.
So like
Yep.
and then they're not going to care about all the cool new things you figured out.
Yeah.
But like you have to have.
Which is what I love about your approach. Every time we talk, I feel like I do get both sides. I wouldn't peg you as somebody who's stuck thinking one way when.
Yeah.
I love the analytical approach you take to something like music in the industry. So.
Well, I mean, I think like with like trying to get to to try to like get into like let's say a social media product, which is very heavily steeped in understanding like the sociology of people and like understand like what sort of why is every actor in this sort of like ecosystem of the business, whether it's like musician broadcasting, a listener listening, like why would they do it? Where does it create value? How much value could it probably create in their lives? What is the emotional arc of those things? And then from which like you can hopefully try to channel in ways that could be productive to the business through the fact that it guides these people to behaviors that are fulfilling for them and a win-win for you. I think that's a very tricky sort of balancing act, and we have to deal with it every day now because you have to continue to like develop new features and think about it. But going back to I think the original question, which is like how I got to B.E.T, was that
I was like, how are we gonna get this back there? But you did it great.
Oh, thanks.
Let's do how do you get to B.E.T, and then let's do a quick run through B.E.T and then get to fan club because I think you were about to start touching into social media and all.
Yeah.
Obviously, that all came from B.E.T and fan club when you learned so much as you shared with the class. That's when it all clicked for me. How much Blast is connected to that history and how you got to Blast through kind of dissecting all of this information and data that you were kind of learning inadvertently and advertently. So let's talk about what happened. How'd you get to B.E.T? Where did physics go? And then where did you get in the industry, the entertainment industry?
So I dropped out of college after a few years of physics. Yeah, right. I don't encourage it. It's very doesn't make it easier.
To each their own. We all have our paths.
Yeah,
there's no judgment.
It's worked out so far, but I can tell you it's definitely like not without challenges. But when I dropped out, like the overall idea was like I'm not dropping out permanently. I was like, I'm gonna take a couple years off. There were like personal and family reasons why I had to take some time.
Was physics a lot? Was it? mentally, was it straining, or was that?
No, it was fine.
Wasn't
It was
anything to do with that. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was actually. I mean, like it was doing okay.
Cool.
You know, it was like but it was just like there were sort of family and life structural issues that got in the way. So so the idea was like, you know what, I'm gonna take a few years off, and then this will be a great opportunity for me to like really try to be a rock star and see if I can make this music thing happen. And if I can't make it happen by, and I set a stopping rule, which is a very important concept, by the way.
Okay.
Like stopping rules are really critical.
So if you can't do it by X, then you give up.
Yeah.
Or move on.
Yeah. And I was going to go back to school, and continue and like finish out the degree, and then, I don't know, go work at NASA or something. And like
everybody's fallback. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. But the idea is that
Starbucks, NASA. Right. It's going to be one of the other.
Well, it was terrifying actually, because I had NASA was kind of nearby, so there was like I knew people at NASA, and a lot of their lives were like, man. And don't get me wrong, I love NASA, and there's a lot of great stuff about NASA. I'm not here to malign them. But the thing about NASA is that a lot of people I knew who were, I guess they were like my age, so probably self-sliced for that. They're like, I just like track space junk, and I was like, and that was a terrifying thing to me. I was like, it's like, yeah, the idea of putting someone on the moon like sounds awesome, but if your job is to like make sure the thing that fell off of satellite is just like not gonna hit the next satellite, that's like enough motivation to be like, yeah, I think I'm gonna try the rock star thing a little bit more, and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah. Well, there's always was it Joe Perry, or no, not Joe Perry, who's the guy from Queen, who became a mathematician.
Oh yeah,
totally blanking his name. Joe Perry was Aerosmith.
Yeah.
But
Brian May.
May, yeah. So he's an astrophysicist now.
Yeah, he's an astrophysicist.
So you could always come back, or
yeah, I guess like if I can just get like 40 Grammys and like whatever it is in a biopic,
and be a shredding guitar player.
Right, yeah, and one of the best guitarists. Like we'll see. But like but one of the things was that like I was like, all right, well I'm dropping out of this, so what's like my approach? And it was like, I'll work at the Apple Store, and my logic was, I need to network into the entertainment industry. I don't have any connections, but everybody in the entertainment industry has Macs.
Yep.
And sort of probabilistically over a certain amount of time, which remember I set a stopping rule. I imagined there's a reasonable chance, if you look at the amount of people come through an Apple Store on a given basis, like to have their Macs fixed or whatever it is.
Totally.
And that Macs all technology breaks at some point, so it's not, I'm not maligning Apple, they're great. But like,
once a physicist, always a physicist. I love your assessment of life and the systems at play.
Right.
It's totally accurate. So I want to hear how it happened.
Well, my logic was, if I work at the Apple Store as a Mac genius, I can like, at some point I'll meet someone in the entertainment industry, and when they like come through, I'll have something to offer them because they're obviously here for my unique skills, and from which maybe I can parlay that into a meaningful relationship in some sort of exchange of like, hey, you teach me to do what you do, and I'll help you with what I've got.
Amazing.
And so I did that, and actually like within a year of dropping out, I had met a couple of people in entertainment. And this is from DC, mind you. The plan was like, I'll probably have to move to New York or LA to get this to actually really work.
Okay.
But even from being in Washington, D.C., like, I met somebody who was like a really great music producer, so he could help me like sort of like learn, like get better at production. But then like I also met my mentor, who's like a sports agent, and very connected in the music world. And I also met like an executive at B.E.T.
Oh, okay.
And this was just fortuitously around the time
that is so critical. I think that moment right there, whether you knew it or not, some people do it subconsciously, put themselves in a position where they're going to get another thing or another step further. But I love you were so aware of it and how to archetype or model the thing that needed to happen.
Yeah.
But I think that moment is such a critical moment for young people in any industry.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to see it, how it worked. And that right there is if that didn't happen, probably all of this wouldn't have happened.
100%. None of this would have happened if I had not taken that approach. And it was like a very asymmetric strategy, right?
Yeah. But you put yourself out there.
Yeah, I put myself out there.
Put your receivers out, and you caught some fish.
You have to engineer a situation that can lend itself to success.
That's a good way to put it.
A lot of entrepreneurship is it's surfing is a very common example for this stuff, because you really do have to submit to the fact that you can't control everything. And actually, not even just that you can't control everything, but that there is the amount that you cannot control is overwhelming. Like, I mean, you're talking
All the
about
waves.
the surfer doesn't get into surfing because their unique ability to control the ocean. It's like
Or to catch every wave.
Yeah, they can't catch every wave, but you develop the skill is in the strategies of how to catch the right wave at the right time and then manipulate it to your benefit.
Okay.
And like timing is a big part of that, by the way. Like, but so with respect to doing this within a year of leaving leaving school, I'm consulting for B.E.T independently, because at the time social media was brand new. There's no rules, and that was another part of it. Is I was like, if I'm going to drop out of school, I want to go into a field where you can make good money and bring value, and that it's not underpinned by academia, because the one thing I've forfeited is the academic validation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
we're talking 2010-ish?
Yeah, this was let me see, I have to do the math for a second. 2009, 2010-ish, okay. Yeah. And, so this is a moment where, there's no rules. It's all just happened. Academia hasn't had the time to collect a body of work, write papers, get it peer reviewed. Mm-hmm. It's happening on a minute by minute basis. That we're
talking YouTube,
Twitter,
Facebook,
Twitter, all the stuff.
So all the social media giants had just started at this point.
Just started.
And you just started B.E.T.
Yeah, and their whole
consulting for B.E.T.
Yeah, I started consulting for B.E.T. partly inspired by the fact that B.E.T. as Viacom, the parent company of B.E.T. at the time, lost in a bidding war against News Corp to buy MySpace, and so there was some rumblings about leadership being considered asleep at the wheel. Top brass at Viacom sort of made a very public spectacle of looking for new blood and sort of shaking it up at the top,
okay.
Which sent ripples through. And so as a result, me making a recent relationship with an executive at B.E.T, mm-hmm. All of a sudden it was grab whatever smart millennial is nearby, who seems to know his way around this stuff. So I came in and I started doing sort of executive consulting or management consulting around content and Web 2.0 is what it was called at the time. And so I worked with them in that capacity, and that was the very beginning of sort of my career. And I started to, there was a lot of low hanging fruit, so it was very easy to start to say, hey, you know what, we should probably put video on the website. Which was, at the time, a very heavy lift because all the tools hadn't been built to do that. Mm-hmm. A lot of conversations of do we do stuff on Facebook? Do we not do stuff on Facebook? Is it a trap? All sorts of stuff that is now
copyright. All that was totally open ended at that point. Nobody knew where to take it, how far to take it.
And one of the things I specialized in was was considered multi-platform content and multi-platform experiences. How do you design a television show that tells a story across multiple screens? How do you engage people? Because at the time, mobile wasn't very big yet.
Totally.
iPhones hadn't come out yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going into B.E.T, Black Entertainment Television.
So at the time, I'll just say there was MTV.
Yeah.
VH1, B.E.T.
Yeah.
These were kind of the major music.
And B.E.T. had
TV shows TV stations.
And B.E.T. had actually sort of recently rose to prominence because 106 in Park had sort of cannibalized TRL.
Yep. 106 in Park was
106 in Park was a request show and a countdown show.
So kind of playing music videos.
Yeah, from the top artists, what's cool.
Cool. And this was on B.E.T.
And it
kind of ate up Total Request Live, which is MTV's version of a kind of call-in request, charts
Yeah.
kind of show.
And a thing that was like predating all this, which was an interesting moment, was that like, there was still like a sort of like an open segregation between like the urban charts.
Yep.
People, executives would be called like, VP of urban music at like, whatever record label.
Yeah.
And like, you would
Wasn't
have
as nearly homogenized and blended as it is today.
Yeah, well, it wasn't, and it was because like on the content level, like you can't tell me that you turn on like In Sync and you don't hear R&B all
100%,
over it.
100%.
But like
And I was an 8-year-old listening to NWA.
Right.
So it's the cultures have been crossing, but in terms of
structurally, it was like
yeah.
structurally it was like segregated in a very weird way, and I think it was because of like maybe there were certain markets in the United States that probably like were not necessarily responsive and like to the idea of like finally like merging the two and acknowledging that like the hegemonic pop mode was in fact R&B, and like but it was basically R&B really was like it's like it was pop if it was if it was like a white person singing it, singing R&B, and if it was like a black person singing R&B, it was R&B, you know, and then they charted differently. They got different Grammys. They, like you do your press tour on like TRL for white audiences, and you do your press tour for like
So you were seeing all of this on the back end.
Yeah, well, this was like just like my entire context growing up, and it was like a weird thing to realize, like, well, I listened to like Radiohead, but I also listened to Nas, and like they were very like there's like a line, and you know, and
we forget how much we felt a certain way, but the system, the structure didn't match.
Yeah, the structure was sort of lagging behind the culture.
Yeah.
And so like BET had recently risen to prominence because there was this like moment where 106 in Park had overtaken TRL in terms of like just completely cannibalized
Ratings and all that.
and
Yeah.
ratings.
So they
and
were
everything
winning.
like that. Yeah, so they were winning. So and that sort of becomes the moment in the like sort of in the early 2000s where it's like the true industry acknowledgement and structural acknowledgement of like, who are we kidding? Like you can't tell me that like Mary J. Blige is not just as pop as Britney Spears. You know what I mean? And so that sort of becomes like I would like to think the moment where pop, R&B, and rap are pop music, are definitively global pop.
Yeah.
And that there's not this like weird like arbitrary line. It's like mostly like legacy race line stuff.
Yep.
And so BET was definitely in prominence, and at the time Viacom overall, which owned BET, Viacom, BET, VH1, MTV, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network.
Yep.
They were the largest media conglomerate in the world, and so this, and then all of a sudden you have these digital challengers just like who are like little acorns that are growing very quickly. And so all of a sudden everyone's like, hey, we should probably start paying attention to this and figure out what the plan was. So anyway, so I start to consult, and I start to come up with these like multi-platform strategies, some of the stuff regarding like what we're gonna do with BET, like .com as an asset, like what's our idea of a content platform in that respect. And I was fortunate enough to do pretty well in my position, and then get the ability to then address the Viacom Marketing Council, which was like sort of the heads of the Viacom assets, and sort of talk more strategically in a top level, which is great. And then
You had ears listening.
I started.
You're producing results.
Yeah, and like I was producing results. I was learning very quickly on the job, like. And you need an audience. Like this is the other thing about entrepreneurship is that you do need an audience of people to watch you succeed. You also don't want to over-index on the need for that, but you do need to have that. Otherwise, if you succeed in a vacuum,
It's funny. I came up with a quote during Sam's interview: "Pay attention, but don't let attention pay."
oh yeah, that's great.
Which is kind of what you're saying right now.
That's 100% what I'm saying. And it's like because like you don't do it for the audience, but you do need to have an audience. Otherwise, like you're shouting into a well.
Totally.
And
But you can't rely too much on that.
Yeah.
In entrepreneurship as well, which we'll get to in a little bit, where you're talking about the need for analysis on every idea and making sure there's a healthy debate and discourse as opposed to just one person saying this needs to happen because I've made it this far and everybody should listen to me.
You need this, I mean, and this is, I think, a lot of things is like having, I mean, look, I think the cure for all this stuff is always like having your own perspective, like having a deep perspective and conviction around your perspective, because that, I think people think that that's a recipe for entrenching yourself into like not hearing from other people and silencing dissent. One of the most common stupid things that you can do as an entrepreneur is you like hire smart people, for example, because like it makes you feel fancy and it makes your organization seem so much cooler. But then you hire them to not listen to them.
Yep.
To like, it's like, oh look, I'm gonna hire this like brilliant person and ram my ideas down their throat and then like be mean if they don't do it. That, and that's like a recipe for disaster. That's how like a lot of companies fail. But
so this B.E.T. things go well, but for some reason you decide to split off and go start taking all the stuff you've learned and let me apply this to something a little bit more specific and a little bit more myself.
And I got into B.E.T. because I was like, all right, well, this will bring me closer to like a record deal, if I ever want.
That's right. We have to remember that part.
Like, I want to be a rock star here.
This is still on the way to becoming a rock star.
Yeah, but like having the physics background helped me understand like sort of like I mean, the media world can operate in a very technical way because you're dealing with there's just like a lot of numbers to it, right? And so like physics kind of gave me the confidence to feel to like generate models and come up with ideas that I can simulate in Excel and then bring to a meeting and then be confident that it will probably work. Okay, you want to do stuff that will compound, and I think that like art and science and like I think entrepreneurship can be an expression of this, but doesn't always have to be. But like generally speaking, there's like a theory of overall like deep investigation into a space. And as an artist, it can be into aesthetic, it can be into narrative, it can be into whatever it is. And like a lifelong, like if it's a lifelong, you look at like
you can go Dylan with it.
Right. Yeah. And like it's like sometimes it's the reaction against your thing that you've been doing, and but like Steve Reich is a really incredible example of this. And that like the arc of his career, like in terms of like, all right, I'm going to develop this unique style based on like this exploration of like phases and tape music and minimalism and all this sort of stuff, and then applying that in like a subject matter oriented meditation and all this stuff. I mean, like that's a great artist, and you look at like people who are doing like proper like let's say medical research or whatever it is. They're like, I'm going to research like I was talking about my friend earlier. He like researches proteins and like just like proteins, and he's just his whole thing is like proteins, and his whole life is I can't speak for his whole life, but like so far it's been the investigation of proteins, and this is this artist,
which is the equivalent of a subgenre of jazz for some musicians,
right?
Or there are very specific sects that you can follow.
So. And like it's like some of the best look at Coltrane. I mean like in terms of like you get to the like once you get to like big steps and you're like or it's like giant steps rather, and you like see like it's like his investigation of like just the tonal relationships of like the circle of fifths taken to the nth degree, and then you have this like just like chord changes that
Philip Glass. I think it's a really good example of physics and music kind of overlapping.
100%. Yeah, and like and like it's deep investigation, and I think for me it was always like it's like all right, the interaction of culture and technology was like the thing, but it you just like spent a lifelong like investigating it, because I was giving like a member of the team a general idea of this, which is everybody can find the cave, like that might have the gold in it. But you have to be in the cave to know where the gold within the cave is, and that's like where the real value comes from. Okay. And that's the investigation. So like you might like it's like you might know, oh, there's some there's some value somewhere in music and technology working together, but then you have to then get to the cave where that resides. Then you have to go deep into the cave to figure it out.
And you got to make sure your helmet light's working. And you gotta have the right equipment. To get in, and then you have to know how to get back out of the cave with the information.
Right. Yeah. It's like are all like it's like these jobs are these roles are anybody can get to the cave. But then, the person who goes into the cave is the one who's unlocking the special value because they're generating unique intellectual property for the fact that they are locating the actual gold within this specific area.
Okay.
Because you're the only person in that cave that has that unique knowledge. Now that, for example, now that Blast is in market, and I have data coming in from how people use it and what works and what doesn't work, and being able to test some of that stuff. Leading up until the moment we launched, in theory, somebody else could have arrived at that same idea conceptually. Maybe they had the chops to to build it, and it's a very hard thing to build. But I mean, I'm sure a major company with infinite resources can absolutely do something like that. But the minute that I'm in market and they're not, I'm now accumulating knowledge that is super specific to what we're building and how people use this specific system, which is now unlocking unique knowledge that nobody can have because they're not in our vantage point. Yeah. We're in the cave. We are seeing exactly where the gold could possibly be.
Cool.
And so it's your job at that point is to try to figure it out as quickly as possible, but, before somebody gets into the cave with you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, because you've also shown them where the cave is at that point.
Totally.
So I did this whole B.E.T. thing and Viacom, and then that allowed me to get a bunch of different other clients, and that allowed. But then it became very clear to me that I really wanted to employ my strategies and content knowledge and to my own startups, and so I was able to get the backing of people I've worked with and mentors of mine who were able to give me the seed capital to start doing. Start my own startup, and the startup was called Fan Club.
Okay.
And the idea was very simply that 5% of your fan base drives 80% of your revenue, and they exist across multiple social platforms. At the time, it was really mostly Facebook and Twitter, but a little bit of Instagram as Instagram was starting to become more of a thing. And that we could use data science, which is also a sort of new paradigm, data science and machine learning, to better figure out who those people, who those super fans were that drove that, 80% of your revenue with the 5%. And look, this is an intuitive thing, right? I mean, a lot of people know who, I don't know, say Lil Wayne is. But think about the amount of people who both know Lil Wayne and have given him money in some capacity, right? How many of them have gone to a Lil Wayne concert? How many of them have paid for a T-shirt? I mean, sure, streaming is a really great form of revenue as well to some degree, although that's discussed in a lot of different ways. But the point is, but the meaningful revenue really kind of comes from those things tickets, merch, etc. And so our whole thesis is if we can find those 5% needle in a haystack across social platforms without having them self-identify, then we could just get them to do a little bit more, and if they, bought a T-shirt and a sticker, then, at scale, you could you could really make an impact on the bottom line of these artists. And the great news is that proved to be true. So the thesis was correct.
Yeah.
The mistake was I didn't understand the full. I didn't understand all the various parameters necessary to do to design a venture product. So as a result, it didn't grow fast enough.
Okay.
But what I did learn from that was that that simple dynamic of 5% to 80% and how to then motivate that 5%. That's that gave me the insight to the upcoming creator economy, which was now almost 10 years later, the forefront of what we're seeing in terms of the future of social media and honestly the distributed entertainment industry.
Totally.
So I mean that's kind of the crux of Patreon,
which is basically the new entertainment industry.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it gave me that understanding of the new entertainment industry.
You have a great quote, whether it's yours or not, about being too early. I really like that when you mentioned it in the class.
Yeah, the only thing worse than being wrong in tech is being too early.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So you're saying fan club was a little bit too early.
it was 10 years too early, which is criminally too early. Like that's like, and it's like, you know, you don't get to
The baton has changed hands many times in 10 years.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And like, you know, we can sit. I mean, like, you know, look, I can tell you that in the future there's going to be like, you know, I don't know, flying cars.
Yeah.
But what does that do for you right now? You know, it doesn't mean. I mean, you could have flying
Basically,
cars.
with fan club, you were the old miner with like the I was here first, but you guys took my gold. Like,
Right. Exactly. And so unfortunately, it didn't work out. The technology worked.
you were in the cave, but you just didn't. You couldn't get the stuff out fast enough.
100%. Yeah, it's like I was in the cave with a single pickaxe. And
There you
like,
go.
You know, I needed like you know, I needed an army of pickaxes. And so it didn't work out the way I would have liked, but it's okay. You know, like you have to accept failure.
Totally.
You have to.
As with songwriting, as with performing, as with anything. You know, if we're talking about music again, there's moments that may seem like epic failures, but they really are just bricks towards another wall.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, it's funny. It's like I can look at it in two minds now. That on one side of it, it's like you in a very objective way. It's like, okay, well, if I'm looking at this process as an investigation, well, that investigation yielded results, and you look at it neutrally. You don't look at it as positive or negative. You look at it as a result. You know, that's what you do in a lab.
Which I appreciate that aspect of our conversation so far, as it does seem like you have a very good sense of when to take it as that, you know, when to take it as a learning experience or as a results experience, but never is it a loss.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, because like a loss is something that you're now defining in the terms of like the perception of other people.
Totally.
Which, you know,
is negative.
Yeah, I mean, and that might mean something within the structure of an organization where like maybe the performance of your job is really determined by like how other people look at you. But when you're an entrepreneur, you're like, it's all on your terms. So it's up to you to decide, like, is this like, you know, is it a failure? And you can't, and even the idea of a binary failure and success is its own, like, you know, not necessarily, I mean, like, it's such a rich activity. There's nothing in there that's valuable. Like, you know, there's probably like a nugget in there that you could probably build an entire empire off of, you know?
Yep.
But what that did was it gave me the concept of like, okay, so this didn't work, but I now uniquely have this proprietary knowledge or semi-proprietary knowledge of like this upcoming major trend. And knowing that that's going to happen in the next however many years, and that's where things are going to go, I can now say, all right, well then, like, what else can I do to contribute to capitalize on that knowledge? I remember famously, like, in my family, like, famously telling, like, my older brother who was like, I don't know, man, like, do you want to like maybe start trying to do like, I don't know, like a normal job or something? And I told him, I was like, you know. And you know, he means it with nothing but love and concern.
Totally.
But I told him, I was like, you know, hey, listen, like the way I look at it, it's like I have $20 million worth of lumber in a warehouse right now that I can't just sell for like the lumber itself. But if I take those $20 million worth of lumber and turn them into like chairs, I can sell it for $100 million. So
love it.
I'm gonna just focus on that for now, you know. And he was like, okay, fair enough.
He's like, okay, I'll go tell mom and dad what you said.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. and so like it's like I've seen too much. I've now been in it.
Is this a chair? Is this?
Yeah, this would be the equivalent of a chair.
So this is Blast.
Yeah, and
Karen suggested we show the device, and I think that's probably a good idea.
Oh yeah, that would probably bring a lot of context.
Yeah. So now that we're kind of getting to Blast, yeah.
Yeah, and so
I don't want to jump the.
That's exactly where it went. Like
cool.
So, like, you know, I did like so.
So this is the device.
So this is a device. Yeah. Well, the way we got to Blast was that, like, you know, fan club, you know, didn't work out, and then I thought to myself, okay, this is all coming. I've learned this through this startup. And there's this concept in business of like blue ocean, red ocean. A red ocean being that like an ocean filled with blood because there's so much competition. A blue ocean is completely unexplored. So I started to like sort of map the media landscape, and I came to the realization like, oh, there's an entirely giant opportunity that nobody is aware of, that audio, like the entire internet, is a visual medium, and no one is doing anything in the internet with respect to audio. At the time, like the big players were. I'm just gonna put this down.
Totally.
The whole point of like the visual medium of like the entire internet was just like catering the visual, like, the visual experience. And so that means like all the rules were written around visual experiences and like, et cetera. So all the design vocabulary was around visual experiences. So with respect to all that, you realize that like there's also a subtle trend that's happening in parallel, which is that the amount of listenable hours for content was also going through the roof because of a lot of macro trends. For example, like every car having Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, these screens in cars that connect to your smartphones, smart speakers, Alexa and all that sort of stuff, Sonos, and the Apple HomePod and Google Home and all that sort of stuff, and then of course like AirPods and all the little wireless earpods, which all those things then in aggregate get you to listen more.
Yeah.
And so there's all these hours of the day now, like that you could be possibly listening to something. Similarly to like, all the hours in the day when the iPhone just like hit the market, that where you could be looking at stuff, because now all of a sudden I'm in line at the bank. I can open up an app and I can like watch a video. And that's like where, trillions of dollars of economic value have been, generated, And so like, as a result, like, you realize if that's how fertile the land is, and you look at like how many people are playing on it, it's like, well, mostly it's a bunch of companies selling the same product, which is, all the recorded music, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, etc., Deezer, whatever. And they don't have a differentiated product, and the core product that is content. And then furthermore, while I'm going through this process, live internet becomes a thing, which is like, when you're talking about like live, like, Facebook Live, but even predating that was Periscope and Meerkat.
Totally.
So the idea of live on the internet, started to like, be injected into the conversation.
But all still very visual based.
All visual based. So then you start to think like, okay, well, what can we, like, why is it? You unpack it and it's like, okay, well, 15 steps of like absolute friction to make something live on the internet. And if you want to repeat it a second time, it's 10 steps. And it's hundreds of dollars. It's, multiple forms of engineering.
Multi-platforms.
Usually, And so that led me to Blast. And that's where I was like, you know what? And also, just
your love of music first and foremost.
Yeah, and then that's where it's like also then it's like you see that from a logical, analytical perspective. Then you marry that with the idea of, oh my God, like this is so perfect for me because I also have the unique emotional understanding of like what it's like to make and perform like music. Or, I've actually dabbled in some comedy, and like comedy is gonna be hopefully a very big part of our platform and talk.
You've done comedy?
Yeah, I've done comedy.
Really?
I wouldn't say well,
but I don't think anybody does it well for at least 10 years. But can you tell us what Blast is? So, aside from this box, what's going on software-wise and user-wise? So
Blast is an app where people like, you're able to follow artists or, broadcasters directly like you would on Instagram or Twitch.
Okay.
It's audio only. It's high quality audio. And for the broadcasters to broadcast to this app, they have to use our specialized device or a software plugin that allows them to broadcast directly through professional audio software. Which is a newer addition to but it started with this. It started with hardware only. Yeah. It started hardware only. And lossless. That's kind of another key feature that very critical. Is very appealing to me. Yeah. Like the very critical thing was to have it lossless. And the other important part basically just means high quality audio, never compressed. Yes. Or never degraded. Degraded, yeah. So. Yeah, very high quality audio. Which you can't get typically on streaming services. They're starting to more now. To differentiate themselves. Yeah. But like, we wanted it to be like high quality audio. And we wanted it also to be something where, you know, the art, like there was an important innovation in the concept that it had to be ephemeral. So broadcasts are live and then they expire within 24 hours.
Okay.
And you know, all this was to be, you know, the idea was that like all of music is trending towards performance. Mm-hmm. I mean, like if you look at it, like, you know, basically like, you know, release cycles are getting shorter and shorter.
Yep.
And so ultimately it's just trending towards performance. And like one of the things I just generally employ when I'm thinking about things is like, what's the 80-20 on anything, the Pareto principle. Well, you can, like a good performer can get to 80% of like what would be as good as an album release with 20% of the effort with just like a, you know, well done broadcast. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, obviously it's ephemeral, but the broadcaster gets to keep a private copy of all their lossless recordings, which is valuable for them to syndicate through SoundCloud or wherever they want to put it. You know, if they want to release it as an album, that's on them. That's great. But the whole thing is facilitated by like a single button experience. Yeah. And we went with hardware. Over the years, we always had to answer to people like, why hardware? Why hardware? And
hold the red button. The card that comes with it says.
We wanted it to be something where, and this is where I was like sensitive to it, and in terms of like I want to make something that I want, and that I would have wanted when I was making music very, you know, very regularly. Irony being that like when I started working on this, I stopped making music in order to focus on it. But like the point was that, you know, if you're somebody who's made music or performed anything, you get into a trance-like meditative state when you're, you know, or in the most ideal versions of this, you can get into that like trance-like meditative state, and which is a very fulfilling experience, you know. And like I think that if our device was something that was tethered to your phone or a function of your phone, now mind you use your phone to set it up once, but you don't have to like, it doesn't stay connected to your phone when you're broadcasting.
That's just to get it connected to the Wi-Fi and.
Yeah, exactly.
Talking, yeah.
But you, generally speaking, you press start and then you perform.
And if you're on the same network, you don't have to reset it up. You just push.
Exactly.
That's only if you go to a different place, yeah.
Yeah, and the setup is like I wanted it to be as easy to use as a Bluetooth speaker. Okay. Even though it's technically the opposite of a Bluetooth speaker, but it's like it's in the same mind space, right?
Yep.
I wanted it to be something that was non-interruptive to your broadcast, and that only gave you positive signals, because when like. When you're making, if you're asking people to do this very vulnerable act of like performing live, you have to do everything you can to make everything like a safe environment to enable that. But the idea was that I wanted it to be something that like you only recognize from the corner of your eye, and that whatever signal it's telling you,
glued to it.
Yeah, and I wanted it to only be positive signals because you're doing something very vulnerable and you should be focused on that.
Totally.
And then additionally, you know, I wanted a very opinionated experience on the listener side, because like. I don't want you to be able to like easily comment, because, you know, I don't want any possible thing to like interrupt that, you know, almost like, you know, shamanistic trance that like, you know, somebody performs. And then like the other part of it is that like the trance isn't just one-sided, it's on the other side too. We designed the app such that we really want people to come in, discover something, but we have this concept internally we call open and go. You come in, you see something, you listen, and then you put the thing in your pocket, and then you're like listening, you know, anywhere between like, you know, 15 minutes to like 2 hours. But that trance is like a very powerful thing. I mean, and you know, you can look into the anthropology of music and like how much why that's like, you know, very much intertwined with like the, you know, spirituality and religion and whatever it is. It's that trance, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain why that is, but it's a very powerful thing.
I can't thank you enough for sharing everything, your journey from the very beginning to now, to Blast, and for inviting me to be a part of Blast and to contribute.
The you know, honor's all mine, and I really appreciate like you having me and being a part of Blast as well. You know, I mean, I don't know that I would have launched this successfully if it wasn't for your involvement.
Oh well, hopefully I'm one of many that helped it out, but I appreciate it, and thanks for joining us on the seminar experience as well. And I can't wait to talk with you and the class in early part of next year.
Yeah, likewise.
Cool. Thanks, man.